I'm going to show you how to make the Mermaid and Dolphin large applique from Kreative Kiwi. For this I'm going to be using a 5x7 hoop, 2 layers of wash away stabiliser per hooping, and there's going to be 3 hoopings in this, a selection of threads, some pins with heads on them, masking tape, my squizzers, and my fabrics and batting cut to size. You'll find a link to this design in the video description below. We're going to start off by hooping our 2 layers of wash away stabiliser. We're now going to pin around the top edge of our hoop to stop the stabiliser from being pulled down between the 2 hoop parts. Take your pin with a head on it, lay it on top of the inner hoop, push it through your stabiliser, bring it back round and through again, and that's going to anchor it, and you're going to do that on all 4 sides. Pop file 1 into your machine, and that's the Dolphin, along with your neutral thread colour, and then you're going to stitch round number 1, and that's going to give you your placement outline for your batting. Place your batting over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 2 to secure it. Trim away your excess batting from around the edge of the stitch line, taking care of course not to cut your stitches. If you're adding backing to yours to make it reversible, then you can add the same fabrics back and front each time with a matching bobbin and thread each time you change colour, and that will make it the same on both sides. If you're going to stitch it onto something, you don't have to add any backing, and if you prefer you can add some cutaway stabiliser on the back that you will add now, and then you will treat it and trim it up later on before you do the satin stitching, and that will just add a blanket over the back of the stabiliser. I'm going to do that, so I'm going to turn my hoop over, place my cutaway stabiliser over the outline and tape it in place. You don't have to do this, you don't have to put any backing on at all if you don't want to. Place your front fabric for the Dolphin over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 3, and that's going to secure your fabric or fabrics to the hoop. Place your fabric for the white of the dolphin's belly over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 2 to secure it. You're now going to trim away all the excess fabric, both back and front of the hoop if you've put any on the back. So I'm going to start with the back of mine. and take care of course not to cut any of the stitches. We're now going to do the zigzag and satin stitching, so load your thread colour and matching bobbin if appropriate, if you're doing both sides the same, into your machine, and then you're going to stitch round number 5. Load your thread colour for the white of the eyes into your machine, and matching bobbin if you're doing completely reversible, and then you're going to stitch round number 6. Load your thread for the black of the eye into your machine and your matching bobbin too if you're doing reversible. I'm going to give you a little tip here. When I do the black of the eyes on top of white and vice versa, I always use a matching bobbin to my thread, because when you're using high contrast colours, sometimes the threads can show through from the bottom. So I've loaded a matching bobbin into my machine as well. And we're now going to stitch round number 7. So we've now finished stitching the dolphin, and we're going to free this from the hoop. Turn your hoop over and carefully trim around the edge of the stitch line, taking care of course not to cut your stitches. We're now going to trim along the edge that hasn't got any satin stitching, to trim it up, because that's where our join's going to be, and we don't want any threads in the way, so make sure that you cut close to the stitch line but without cutting any of the stitches. And that's our first hooping completed, and we can set it aside for the minute. We now come to the second hooping, so load file 2 into your machine. The first colour that we're going to be using will be for the hair, so load your thread colour for the hair into your machine as well. And then you're going to stitch round number 1, and that's going to give you your placement outline for your batting. Place your batting over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 2 to secure it. Trim away the excess batting. I'm now going to add my cutaway stabilizer to the back. We're now going to place your fabric for her hair over this area here, and if you're doing reversible you do the same on the back, and then tape it in place. Making sure that you've got your thread colour for her hair loaded into your machine. You're now going to stitch round number 3, and that's going to secure the hair in place. We're now going to trim away the excess fabric from around here, because we're going to be placing our next fabric there afterwards, and that's going to reduce all the bulk. Place your fabric for her skin over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 4. If you're worried about your thread showing through the satin stitching of her skin later on, you can swap your thread out to a thread that's going to match your fabric. As I'm using a lightish colour anyway, I'm not too bothered, so I'm going to stay with the same colour that I've done the hair in. Load your thread colour and matching bobbin if you're doing a reversible applique for the white of the eyes into your machine, and then you're going to stitch round number 5. Load your thread colour for the black of the eyes into your machine, and matching bobbin as well, of course, if you're doing reversible. I'm going to load a black bobbin in anyway, as I always do when I'm stitching on high contrast features, and then we're going to stitch round number 6. Next is the eyebrows, so load your thread colour for that into your machine. I've loaded my thread colour for her hair back into mine, and then you're going to stitch round number 7. Load your thread colour for her nose into your machine, and I've gone with a slightly darker colour than her skin. And then you're going to stitch round number 8. Load your thread colour for her lips into your machine. I'm staying with the same colour. And then you're going to stitch round number 9. And don't forget, you need a matching bobbin if you're doing reversible. We're now going to trim up all the excess fabric from both back and front of the hoop if appropriate. So if you've done anything on the back, then turn your hoop over and trim around the edge, taking care, of course, not to cut your stitches. We're now going to do the zigzag stitching around the hair. So load your thread colour for the hair into your machine, along with a matching bobbin and thread, of course, if you're doing reversible, and then you're going to stitch round number 10. We now come to the join for the dolphin to the mermaid. So we're going to sit this stitch line here on top of this stitch line here, and then we're going to secure it in place. Now if you're using pins like me, then make sure that you keep them right out of the way of the stitch line. I'm going to show you another little trick. Where you've got a narrow area here and you can't get anything in to secure it really, if you use sellotape, it will stitch through it and it will just pull off really easily, far easier than using masking tape. So that's what I'm going to use to secure around here. That should be alright. Load your thread colour for her skin and matching bobbin, if appropriate, into your machine, and then you're going to stitch round number 11, and that's going to zigzag along these joins and secure the two pieces together. So making sure that you've got your matching bobbin and thread, if appropriate, loaded into your machine for her skin. You're now going to stitch round number 12, and that's going to do the satin stitching for her skin. Change your thread colour for her bikini top, and don't forget your matching bobbin if you're doing reversible, and then you're going to stitch round number 13. We're now going to stitch her hair, so load your thread colour for that into your machine and matching bobbin as well if you're doing reversible, and then you're going to stitch round number 14. We're now going to stitch the final bit on this hooping, and that's the star in her hair. So load your thread colour for that into your machine along with the bobbin if you're doing the reversible, and then stitch round number 15. We're now going to free this from the hoop, so turn your hoop over and taking care not to cut your stitches or your segment underneath, you're now going to free it from the hoop. And that's our second segment complete, and we can set our work aside for the minute. We now come to the third hooping, so hoop and pin your 2 layers of wash away stabiliser as you did before. Load file number 3 into your machine along with your neutral thread. Then you're going to stitch round number 1, and that's going to give you a placement outline for your batting. Place your batting over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 2 to secure it. Trim away the excess batting from around the edge of the stitch line, taking care not to cut your stitch line, of course. I'm now going to place my backing fabric, I say fabric, cutaway stabiliser on the back. Place your fabric for the front over the outline and tape that in place as well. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 3 to secure them. I'm going to show you how to use metallic thread on the tail, and the method that I'm going to show you will make sure that you don't have any problems with thread breaks, and it will be virtually, and I can only say virtually, tear free. Metallic thread can be a bit quirky. The problem is if the thread twists and gets caught in the eye of the needle, it's going to break and it's going to shred and it's going to give you all sorts of problems. So I'm going to tell you how to show you how to use it so that you don't have any of those problems. Okay, so when we stitch with metallic threads, we need to use a thread stand, and for this I'm using a plastic beaker with 3 elastic bands chained together, and I just pop that over the bottom of the beaker there so that it's got ears. I've got a pencil, I've got my spool, and you must remove any thread nets or anything holding the thread in place. We also need to make sure that when our thread comes off of the spool, that it does so straight rather than this way round where it twists off, because we don't want it forming any kinks by the time it gets to the needle. So you just take your pencil, put it through the centre of the bobbin, and then put the ears onto the pencil, and your bobbin thread is now ready to dispense. And I put that on the right hand side of my machine, sort of just before the balance wheel, and then I thread this up through the 2 pieces of the bobbin winder, and then I just thread as normal. Now there's a few more things that you need to do with your machine. You need to use a 9014 top stitch needle. It's got a slightly larger eye compared to the 7511, and it will allow your thread to pass smoothly through it. You've also got to slow your machine down to its slowest setting, usually about 350 stitches per minute. You also need to use a thread stand, which I've already covered, and you need to loosen your top thread tension by 2 or 3 digits so that your machine is allows the thread to pass through the tensioning discs smoothly. This is very important, because if it doesn't, where the thread is slightly stiffer and possibly slightly thicker, it can cause you bother and cause you thread breakages. So reduce your top tension by 2 or 3. So if it's on, say for like mine is on 0 normally, for everyday stitching. I've reduced mine to -3, and you'll get a feel for what your machine prefers as you've stitched metallic threads once or twice, and then you'll be able to then to stick to those settings. Okay, so I've threaded my machine, I've reduced the tension, I've got a 90-14 needle in it as well, and we're now ready to stitch round number 4. If you're doing reversible, then of course you wind a bobbin with your metallic thread. It will stitch absolutely fine, you don't need to worry about that. Next we're going to stitch the details on the fin of the tail. So I'm staying with my metallic thread for this, but if you want to change out yours, do so now, and if you're doing reversible, don't forget to change your bobbin as well. We're now going to stitch round number 5. We're now going to trim up the excess fabric, so if you've done anything on the back, you need to do the back as well. I just want to show you here, I used a metallic thread, bobbin sorry, in my machine so that you could see that it stitches perfectly fine. So we're now going to trim this up. Take care of course not to cut your stitches. Making sure that you've got your matching bobbin and thread loaded into your machine if you're doing reversible. We're now going to stitch round number 6, and that's going to zigzag around the edge, and it's going to stop when we come to join the previous segment to this one. I missed a step when we finished the last segment, and that was just to trim up around here, so I'm going to do that now because it makes joining a lot neater. Okay, so as we did with this segment joining to this one, we're going to do it in exactly the same way. So we're going to sit this stitch line here on top of this stitch line here and make sure that it all lines up nicely. And if you use pins to hold it in place, do make sure that you keep them right out of the way of the stitch line. Oops, that wasn't very straight, was it? And I'm going to add a little bit of tape just on these corners here, just to hold them down while it stitches. Okay, so pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 7, and that will zigzag along here and join all the pieces together. Check your join, make sure that you're happy with it. If you're not, unpick the zigzag stitching, reposition it, secure it, and then stitch round number 7 again. If you're happy with it, then you're going to stitch round number 8. So make sure that you've got your matching bobbin and thread, if you're doing reversible, loaded into your machine before you actually start stitching. I'm very sorry, I had a technical hitch and freeing from the hoop didn't record, so I do apologise, but you will do it exactly the same way as you did for the previous hoopings. Then once you've done that, we're now going to dissolve the excess stabiliser. So take a cotton bud and dip it in some warm water and just run it around the edge. If you've done reversible, you will need to do the joins as well, but if you haven't, it doesn't really matter. And that's our Mermaid and Dolphin applique finished. I hope you enjoyed this stitch along. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to be notified of new videos as soon as they're published. Do pop along to Kreative Kiwi's Facebook group. There's always lots of ideas, help and inspiration there for everybody. And thank you very much for joining me. There's a link to this design in the video description below, along with lots of other information such as where I get my supplies, tools and some discount codes for you as well.